Welcome back. I'm Vincent Perryman, and you're watching Legalese. Joining us on our show is attorney Thomas Greer of Bailey & Greer. We're discussing legal malpractice. Thomas, before the break, we kind of were segueing into the issue of whether or not somebody had a claim, and then if they do have a claim, what can they recover?
Okay. When we were talking last, I used the example of not returning phone calls. Mm-hmm. Okay. Lawyers should do that. You have a duty to your client to respond to their inquiries. However, if failing to return a phone call didn't harm the case, not going to be able to bring a legal malpractice case against them. So you have to prove damages. If a lawyer misses a statute of limitations, let's say in a car wreck case, and therefore the client can never bring a lawsuit to recover the injuries they sustained, if the client misses that statute, well, if it was the client's fault, if they didn't have a valid underlying car wreck claim, mm-hmm. then the attorney is not responsible for that. So what happens in underlying cases involving litigation, you have to prove, after you sue the lawyer for legal malpractice, you have to prove that you would have won your case.
Okay, so it's a case within a case.
It's a case within a case, and you have to prove to a jury or to a judge, whatever the case may be, you have to prove that, look, if this lawyer had handled my case properly, I would have won, and I would have collected X number of dollars. Or mm-hmm. If you can't prove that, then the lawyer screwed up. They were negligent, but they didn't cause you damage.
Okay. And then in some situations, instead of it being malpractice, it's really a violation of the ethics that all attorneys have to fall under.
Sure. Despite all the lawyer jokes and things, we do have a code of conduct that lawyers should hold themselves to, and that we're held accountable for. So, yeah, you can have a lawyer who has acted negligently, neglected the client's case. All kinds of things can happen, and they can be brought up on disciplinary charges by the Board of Professional Responsibility, mm-hmm. and they can hand out all kinds of different punishments, from a public censure, where it's sort of just a public embarrassment to say, hey, this lawyer did, he was negligent in his client's case, all the way from being disbarred. You have situations where maybe a lawyer misappropriates funds of a client. And they can be disbarred for that, but you do have to separate the two. You can have an ethical violation, and not have a valid legal malpractice claim.
Now, and this kind of brings up a odd question in my mind, because I've run into this occasionally, where I don't recognize the attorney, and I put that in quotation marks on the other side, and I look up and I find there's no bar number there. Mm-hmm. And myself and another attorney, we went through this trying to get somebody to take some action against this individual that was not licensed but was practicing law. If you've got somebody like that, because especially in some immigrant communities, you've got in other countries where notaries do some legal things, and we saw the Attorney General go after the group of people that were holding themselves out as attorneys for unauthorized practice law. Does that fall into any of the legal malpractice if you've got somebody that's done something like that?
That's a good question, Vince, and I guess to honestly answer your question, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Okay, you do have to have a license in Tennessee to practice law, mm-hmm. and one of the things I would tell your listeners, when you go to hire an attorney, you can go to the Board of Professional Responsibility website, and you can look that attorney mm-hmm. up. It's I wrote it down to make sure I got it right.
It is www.tbpr.org.
Right. So go to that website, type the lawyer's name in. If he doesn't show up, then you might want to do a double check on that. Interestingly enough, on that website, you can also find out the attorney's disciplinary resume. You can find out if they've had prior board complaints. So I encourage everybody to do that before they hire an attorney.
Yeah. So now, as far as if an attorney's committing malpractice on a regular and consistent basis, I would think probably they're not that successful. So as far as being able to recover your damages from them, how does that occur?
Okay. As within most aspects of litigation, there's Usually going to be insurance coverage. You hope so. You carry car insurance. If you get in a wreck, your car insurance company is going to pay for it. You carry homeowners insurance, hopefully. So hopefully lawyers do, but there's no law in Tennessee, believe it or not, that requires an attorney to have malpractice insurance.
So it might be better for our state legislature, instead of attacking all of the plaintiffs' attorneys out there and putting forward legislation such as loser pays all the attorney's fees, to actually do something that would be smart and require attorneys to have malpractice coverage.
Certainly, it would be in the best interest of the citizens of Tennessee for there to be some kind of law that required a certain level of malpractice coverage, because as you said, if you have an attorney who's committed malpractice, they've caused oftentimes catastrophic damages to the client, and then there's no money to pay for it, then the client's left holding the bag. So I tell people the first question you should ever ask your attorney if you're interviewing to hire an attorney is, do you have malpractice insurance, and what are the limits? And you can ask your attorney, show me your coverage. Mm-hmm. They can't do that. Buyer beware.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I guess the other thing in here is, what are the most common malpractice cases?
Okay. Things we've already mentioned, things I see a lot in the cases that I've handled: missing a statute of limitations. If you don't file a case in time, you can't ever file it. There are also deadlines imposed by courts. So there are rules of civil procedure. There are rules that deadlines that courts put in place. If you don't file a response in time, or you don't file an answer in a time or a certain pleading, your case can get kicked out. Mm-hmm. The final thing that's fairly common that we see a lot of is the misappropriation of funds. Mm-hmm. If you have a client that comes in and they pay you a retainer, say $25,000 to represent you, and they're supposed to get a portion of it back, well, when they go to get it back, the attorney has used that money for his own personal benefit or for another case, and that's not allowed either. Those are probably the most common things that we see.
Okay. When we return from our break, we'll talk more with Thomas Greer about legal malpractice. Please stay with us.